The first encounter, the streets were quiet. Too quiet for this part of town. Broken cars stood on the side of the road, covered with dust and vines. Most houses were empty now. Windows were smashed, doors left half open like mouths frozen in a scream. The war had taken almost everything. Ethan walked slowly, a bag of food in his hand. He moved like someone who knew he had to be careful. His eyes checked every corner, every shadow before he stepped forward. He was not afraid for himself. He was afraid of what might happen if people saw where he was going. He reached a ruined building, its roof half gone, walls cracked from old explosions. To anyone else, it looked abandoned. But Ethan knew better. He had discovered something here weeks ago, something that no one else must know. He pushed the broken door, making as little sound as possible. Inside, the air smelled of dust and burned wood. The light came through holes in the roof, falling in thin, weak lines. Ethan stopped, listened, then whispered, "It's me. I brought food." No answer came, just silence. He placed the bag on the floor, then slowly stepped back. For a moment it seemed like no one was there. Then from the dark corner of the room there was movement. A figure appeared. Not human. The alien mother was tall but thin, her skin pale with faint silver lines running across it, like glowing rivers under her skin. Her eyes were large, dark, filled with both fear and sadness. She looked at Ethan but did not speak. She never spoke at first. Behind her, a smaller figure peeked out. The daughter. She was tiny, her head tilted with curiosity, her silver eyes brighter than her mother's. Her skin glowed faintly, but her face was soft, almost human-like. She looked hungry. Ethan raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's food," he said softly. "Bread, some fruit. Please take it." The mother hesitated. Her hand rested on her daughter's shoulder, keeping her back. She looked at Ethan like he was a storm about to break. Ethan took a step back toward the door. "I'll leave it here," he said. "You don't have to come closer." He placed the bag on a piece of broken furniture and turned to go. But just as he touched the door, he heard the soft shuffle of small feet. He turned his head slightly. The little girl had walked forward. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and grabbed the bag. Her mother hissed something in her own tongue, but it was too late. The girl clutched the bag with both hands, her face lighting up as she pulled out an apple. For the first time, Ethan saw her smile. It was such a simple thing, but in the middle of a broken city, that smile felt like sunlight. The mother stepped forward quickly, pulling the girl back. She stared at Ethan again, her face full of warning. She was telling him without words, "Go, don't stay here. Don't risk this." Ethan nodded. He did not push. He only gave a small smile, then opened the door and stepped out. Outside, the wind carried the distant sound of soldiers moving, their voices sharp and cold. Ethan's chest tightened. If they found out about the mother and daughter, they would kill them without a second thought. To most people, aliens were nothing but enemies, monsters. But Ethan had seen something different. The first time he found them, they were hiding among rubble, starving and weak. He could have walked away. He could have reported them. But something had stopped him. Maybe it was the way the little girl looked at her mother, clinging to her hand, too thin to even stand properly. Maybe it was because Ethan once had a daughter too, before the war took her away. He couldn't let these two die. Not when he still had food. Not when he still had a choice. Ethan walked home quickly, keeping his head down. He knew this was dangerous. If anyone saw him bringing food here, questions would be asked. And questions in this time were deadly. But as he reached his own door, he remembered the little girl's smile. He remembered how she clutched that apple like it was the greatest treasure in the world. That memory told him he had done the right thing. Still, one thought burned in his mind. How long can I keep this secret? The world outside was falling apart. Patrols grew tighter every week. Rumors spread fast and people were hungry. Neighbors watched each other, waiting to report anything unusual for a reward. And Ethan was hiding two of the most unusual beings on Earth. That night, as he lay on his bed, he could not sleep. Every sound outside made him tense. Every knock of the wind against the window felt like a soldier's fist. But underneath the fear, there was something else. A strange feeling he had not known for years. Hope. He had seen it in the child's eyes. He had felt it in the way she smiled at him. And that hope, fragile as it was enough to make him return the next day. Because even in a broken world, Ethan knew one thing. If he could protect them, if he could keep them alive, Maybe he could protect a piece of his own lost humanity too. And so the routine began. Every day a man with a bag of food. Every day a mother who did not trust him. And a daughter who smiled a little more. It was only the beginning, but beginnings, Ethan knew, always came with danger. Silent routine the next morning. Ethan stood at his small kitchen table, packing another bag of food. He placed bread inside, then 2 small apples, and finally a piece of cheese he had been saving. He stared at the bag for a moment. Every bite of food mattered in times like these. But then he remembered the girl's smile, bright like sunlight in the ruins, and he tightened the bag's knot without regret. The streets outside were still quiet, but this time he noticed more people watching. Neighbors leaned against broken walls, eyes following him as he walked. Some nodded, some said nothing, but Ethan knew suspicion lived in silence. People noticed when a man carried food every day, especially when no one else had enough. Still he walked. His steps steady, his face calm, as if nothing was unusual. Inside, though, his chest was heavy. Every time he left his house, he knew he was risking everything. Not only his own life, but theirs too. When he reached the ruined building, the door creaked under his hand. He slipped inside and whispered, "It's me again." At first there was no answer, but he knew they were there. He placed the bag on the same broken table as before. This time, though, he didn't step away immediately. He stayed, waiting in silence. From the shadows, the daughter appeared first. Her small silver eyes glowed faintly, her steps quick with excitement. She clutched the bag, pulled out the bread, and tore a piece into her mouth. She ate with such hunger that Ethan's heart ached. The mother appeared a moment later. Her eyes, dark and sharp, stayed fixed on Ethan. She did not thank him, but her shoulders were less tense than before. For the first time, she didn't pull the girl back. She let her eat freely, as if accepting this strange man's gift, at least for today. Ethan smiled softly. He wanted to speak, but he knew words might break this fragile moment, so he simply nodded, then stepped back. The little girl looked up from her bread and gave a small wave with her hand. It was quick, almost shy, but it was enough. Days turned into weeks. Every morning, Ethan filled a bag and walked the same path. Every evening, he returned home unnoticed, or so he hoped. Each visit was quiet, yet something changed each time. At first, it was only the daughter's wave. Then it became a smile. Soon, she began to mimic his words. "Food," she whispered one day, her voice soft and strange, as if human speech was heavy on her tongue. Ethan froze. Then he smiled. "Yes, food." The mother tensed, pulling the girl close, but she did not stop her. Instead, she watched carefully, her large, dark eyes searching Ethan's face for any sign of threat. Ethan never pushed. He spoke slowly, simple words. Bread, apple, cheese. He pointed at each item as he said the name. The girl repeated after him, her voice growing a little stronger each time. The mother never joined. She stayed silent, her language unspoken, but Ethan could feel her resistance slowly fading. She still didn't trust him fully, but she no longer looked at him like he was a danger. Now she looked at him like a mystery. But outside, danger grew. Rumors spread through the town. People whispered about strange lights seen at night, shadows moving in places long abandoned. The word alien began to pass from mouth to mouth, like smoke from a hidden fire. One evening, Ethan heard 2 soldiers talking near the marketplace. "They say one of them survived," one muttered. "More than one," the other replied. "And whoever's hiding them will hang." Ethan's stomach turned cold. He forced himself to walk away, keeping his face blank, but inside fear burned. The world was shrinking around them. One wrong move, one curious neighbor, and everything would end. Still, the next morning he carried the bag. That day, something new happened. When he placed the food down, the daughter ran forward as usual. But this time she didn't stop at the table. She walked closer to him, Ethan's breath caught. He stayed still, not wanting to frighten her. Slowly she reached out her small hand and touched his fingers. Her skin was warm, almost human, but with a faint pulse of light under it, like a hidden star. "Friend," she whispered, her accent broken but clear. The word struck him like a blade and a blessing all at once. For years, Ethan had lived alone, carrying only memories of people he had lost. But now here in the ruins, a child not of his world had called him friend. The mother gasped, stepping forward quickly. She pulled the girl back, her eyes fierce, but she did not hide her this time. Instead, she looked at Ethan long and hard, as if trying to see what he truly was. Ethan lowered his voice, soft and steady. I will keep you safe." The mother's jaw tightened. She did not answer, but for the first time she did not look away. That night Ethan sat in his dark room, unable to sleep. He thought of the little girl's hand, the warmth of it, the way she said friend. But he also thought of the soldiers, their words, their cold laughter. He knew the routine could not last forever. Every day he risked discovery. Every day he grew more attached, and somewhere deep inside he understood this. One day he would have to make a choice, to walk away, or to bring them closer. For now, though, the routine continued. Silent, dangerous, and full of unspoken trust. And in that silence, something powerful was growing, something even war had not destroyed. The connection, the days of silence were over. What began with food and quiet gestures was slowly becoming something more. Ethan no longer walked into the ruined building like a stranger. Now, when he stepped through the cracked doorway, the little girl ran to him with open hands, her silver eyes shining. "Friend," she whispered every time. It was only one word, but it carried the weight of trust. The mother still watched carefully from the shadows. Her tall figure stayed close, her sharp eyes never leaving him. She allowed the girl to come forward, to touch his hand, to take the food, but her own lips stayed sealed. She spoke only in her own tongue, soft and flowing, words that Ethan could not understand. But one evening, everything changed. That day, Ethan brought something different. Instead of bread and apples, he carried a small book. Its cover was torn, its pages worn from years of handling. It was a children's book he had once read to his daughter. He hadn't touched it since the war. When he placed the food down, he also set the book on the broken table. The little girl tilted her head, curious. She touched the cover with glowing fingers, then looked at Ethan with a question in her eyes. Ethan knelt down, opened the book, and pointed to the first picture. A simple drawing of a tree. "Tree," he said. The girl repeated softly. "Tree." Her mother stiffened, her body tensing like a bow pulled tight. But the child leaned closer, eager, repeating the word again and again until her voice grew clearer. Ethan turned the page. "A house." "House," he said. "House," she repeated, smiling. Page after page, the lesson continued. The girl learned quickly, her mind sharp, her memory strong. Ethan felt something stir in his chest, pride, hope, and a bittersweet ache. He had once taught his own child this way. Now he was teaching another, one who wasn't even human. The connection deepened in small ways. The little girl began to speak more. "Thank you. Eat. Safe." Each word made her mother watch harder, as though wondering if language itself was dangerous. Yet she did not stop her daughter. One evening, as the lesson ended, Ethan pointed to himself. "Ethan," the girl copied, "Etan." Then she pointed at herself, tapping her chest. "Lyra." Ethan's smile widened. For weeks he had wondered their names. Now he knew the daughters. "Lyra," he said softly. The mother finally stepped forward. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and spoke, her voice low, careful. "Sarah?" Ethan looked up. Her voice was beautiful, strong yet trembling, like music played on a cracked instrument. He repeated the name gently. "Sarah." The mother's eyes narrowed, but something flickered in them. For the first time, she had given him a piece of herself. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his small home, staring at the stars above. He thought of Lyra's glowing hand, her eager voice, and the way Sarah had finally spoken. He remembered his own daughter, gone now, taken by the war. The memory burned, but it also guided him. Perhaps this was why he couldn't walk away. Perhaps this was why he risked everything, because in Lyra's smile he saw the ghost of his child. And in Sarah's eyes he saw a mother's grief, one he knew too well. The next week Ethan grew bolder. He brought not only food but also small things, a blanket, a cup, a candle. Each gift made Lyra clap her hands with joy. Sarah accepted them quietly, but her silence was different now. It was not distrust. It was thought. Sometimes Ethan caught her staring at him, her dark eyes full of questions. Who was this man? Why did he help? What did he want? Ethan wanted nothing but to keep them alive. Yet he knew words would never be enough to prove it. Only time could. But outside, time was running short. One evening, as Ethan left the building, he noticed soldiers on the street. Their boots crunched on gravel, their rifles heavy in their arms. Aliens were spotted near the old ruins, one of them said. Command wants every block searched. Ethan's pulse quickened. He turned away before they could notice him, his heart hammering in his chest. The net was closing. That night he thought about Sarah and Lyra hiding in the ruins, so close to danger. He thought about how fragile this connection was. One mistake, one loud step, and everything would shatter. But when he returned the next morning, Lyra greeted him with both arms outstretched. "Ethan," she cried, her voice still broken but clear. It was the first time she spoke his name. Ethan knelt, his throat tight. He wanted to tell her she was safe. He wanted to promise her the world. Instead, he only placed a hand gently on her head and whispered, "I'll protect you." Sarah watched, silent as always. Yet her face softened just for a second. The connection was no longer only food or books. It was trust. It was fragile, dangerous, but real, and Ethan knew this. Once trust was born, it could not be ignored. He was no longer just the man who brought food. He was becoming part of their lives, and that meant the danger was no longer outside the door. It was inside his heart. The outside threat the city was changing. At first, Ethan thought it was only in his mind. But soon he saw the signs. Soldiers patrolled the streets more often now. Their boots echoed on the broken pavement, their helmets shining under the pale sun. They searched doorways, opened abandoned houses, and asked questions no one wanted to answer. "Have you seen anything unusual?" they demanded. "Any strangers? Any movement at night?" People shook their heads quickly. No one wanted trouble, but behind closed doors, whispers began to spread. "They're here," someone muttered at the market. "Aliens survived the war. I swear I saw one." The words carried like smoke, thin and dangerous. And every time Ethan heard them, his chest grew tighter. One evening, as Ethan returned from the ruined building, he caught the sound of two men talking near a fire barrel. "They say the aliens hide close to the river," one said. "Nah," the other replied. "Closer, maybe in the East Block. I heard a man's been bringing food, every day." Ethan froze in the shadows. His hand gripped the strap of his bag, his knuckles pale. The men laughed, but their voices carried suspicion. "They'll find him," one muttered. "And when they do, he'll hang with the aliens." Ethan walked on, his face calm, but inside his blood felt like ice. They were looking. They were watching. That night, when he entered the ruined building, he was more careful than ever. He placed the food down, scanning the cracks in the walls, listening for footsteps. Lyra rushed to him, bright as always. She held up the book he had given her, pointing to a picture with a proud grin. "Bird?" she said. Ethan smiled, kneeling beside her. "Yes, Bird." Her voice was stronger now, her words clearer. She laughed, and the sound filled the ruined place like music. But behind her, Sarah did not laugh. She stood tall, her dark eyes fixed on Ethan. "You risk," she said slowly. Her accent was heavy, her words broken, but the meaning was clear. Ethan met her gaze. "I know." She stepped closer, her silver-lined skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "Why?" The question hung heavy in the air. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was simple, but not easy. "Because I can't watch you die," he said finally. "Not you. Not her." Sarah's eyes searched his face as if trying to see the lie, but she found none. The next morning, soldiers came to Ethan's street. He stood by his window, heart pounding as they knocked on doors, shouting orders. "We search every home," one barked. "Report anything unusual." Neighbors obeyed quickly, opening their doors, letting soldiers stomp through their rooms. Ethan clenched his fists. If they came to him, if they searched, they might find signs. An extra blanket missing, food gone too quickly. But when they reached his house, they only glanced inside, then moved on. He forced himself to breathe. He had been lucky. Too lucky. He knew it would not last. That evening he went again to Sarah and Lyra. But this time he spoke with urgency. "You can't stay here forever," he whispered. "They are searching, every day closer and closer." Sarah shook her head firmly. "No, danger. They'll find you," Ethan pressed. "If they do, it's over." Her voice rose, sharp, filled with fear. "You not know. You bring death." Lyra clutched her mother's arm, frightened. Ethan stepped back, guilt stabbing him like a blade. "I'm only trying to help," he said softly. Sarah's chest rose and fell, her eyes burning. But after a long silence, her voice broke, weaker now. "We have nowhere." The words hit him harder than a shout. He saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't refusing out of pride. She was refusing out of fear. Later that night, Ethan sat awake, listening to the wind rattle his broken shutters. He thought of Lyra's laughter, her small, glowing hand. He thought of Sarah's eyes full of grief and fight, and he thought of the soldiers searching, hunting, closing in. The choice was pressing against him now, heavy as a storm. Keep the secret and hope it lasted, or act before it was too late. The next day, the danger came closer. As Ethan walked through the market, a soldier stopped him. "You," the man barked. "What's in the bag?" Ethan's throat tightened. The bag was full of bread and fruit. Too much for one man alone. "Just food," Ethan said calmly. The soldier grabbed it, peered inside, then narrowed his eyes. "You eat well, don't you?" "Better than most," Ethan forced a laugh. "I save what I can. I go hungry some days. It looks more than it is." The soldier stared for a long moment, then shoved the bag back into his chest. "Watch yourself." Ethan nodded, walking away quickly, but his legs shook with every step. He knew then. The net was closing faster than he thought. That evening, when he stepped into the ruins, he did not smile. His voice was tight as he placed the food down. "They're watching me," he whispered. "Soon they'll know. We don't have much time." Lyra tilted her head, not fully understanding, but she touched his hand, her silver eyes calm. Sarah stood silent, her body tense. She knew. She always knew. The outside threat was no longer just whispers. It was at their door, and Ethan realized something terrifying. If he didn't act soon, it wouldn't only be Sarah and Lyra who were destroyed, it would be him too. The choice. The city felt tighter with each passing day. Ethan noticed it in the way soldiers lingered longer on corners, in the way neighbors lowered their voices when he walked by. Suspicion was spreading like a sickness, and he was carrying the cure and the poison at once. Every step to the ruined building felt heavier now. He still carried food, but his eyes scanned every rooftop, every shadow. He knew someone was watching. He could almost feel it. When he entered the building that evening, he found Lyra curled up under the blanket he had given her. Her breathing was shallow, her silver glow faint. Ethan's stomach twisted. She was ill. Sarah sat beside her, her face drawn with fear she tried to hide. When she saw Ethan, her eyes softened for the first time. "Weak," Sarah whispered. Her voice cracked like dry wood. Ethan knelt quickly, touching Lyra's forehead. She was hot, burning with fever. "She needs real food," Ethan said. "Medicine. She can't survive like this." Sarah shook her head, anger flashing in her dark eyes. "To danger. You bring death." Ethan looked at her, voice low but fierce. "If she stays here, she will die. If she comes with me, maybe she has a chance." The silence between them was sharp. Ethan could hear the wind outside, the distant sound of boots on stone. Every second mattered, yet the choice sat between them like a wall. That night, Ethan lay awake in his own bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. Lyra's pale face haunted him. He thought of her trying to say bird and tree, her laughter echoing in ruins. He thought of her calling him friend, and he thought of his own daughter, her small hands, her bright voice, before the war took her away forever. Was he willing to lose another child? Was he willing to stand by and watch her fade, just because he was afraid? His heart already knew the answer. His mind fought against it. If he brought them into his home, the risk would be unbearable. Neighbors would notice. Soldiers might search. One wrong glance, one careless word, and all three of them would hang. But if he didn't, he would be walking away from hope itself. The next morning, Ethan walked through the market with heavy steps. He bought food carefully, smaller amounts this time so it wouldn't draw attention. But as he turned, he caught sight of a notice nailed to a wall. Reward for information. Any citizen who provides proof of alien activity will be rewarded with food rations and protection. The paper flapped in the cold wind. Several people stood staring at it, their eyes hungry. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Hunger made men cruel. For bread, neighbors would betray neighbors. For survival, they would sell out anyone. He walked away quickly, but the choice inside him grew sharper. He had no more time to wait. That evening, when he stepped into the ruins, he found Sarah holding Lyra close. The girl was awake but weak, her silver glow dimmer than ever. She whispered Ethan's name, her voice soft like a dying flame. He knelt beside her, his throat tight. "I won't let you die here." Sarah looked at him, her eyes hard. "You fool," she whispered. "Maybe," Ethan said. "But I'm a fool who still believes in life." Sarah stared at him, torn between fear and desperation. Her lips trembled as she looked at Lyra. Finally, she whispered, "You promise." "Safe?" Ethan's heart pounded. He nodded firmly. "I promise." With my life, the silence stretched. Then Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed. She no longer looked at Ethan as a stranger. She looked at him as the last chance she had. She gave the smallest of nods. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him, though fear followed close behind. The choice had been made. That night, Ethan prepared his home. He cleared a space in the back room, the one with no windows. He laid down extra blankets, moved his small supplies, and hid what little food he had left. His hands shook as he worked. He had crossed the line now. There was no turning back. Every sound outside made him pause. A shout in the distance, boots on gravel. It all reminded him of the cost if he failed. But when he thought of Lyra's faint voice calling his name, his resolve hardened. He would not lose her. He would not lose them. The next evening, when he entered the ruins, he did not bring only food. He brought a plan. "We leave tonight," he whispered. "When it's dark." Sarah's eyes widened, her body stiff with fear. But when she looked at Lyra, lying weak in her arms, she nodded once, silent. Ethan reached out his hand. Lyra's small fingers curled around his, glowing faintly in the shadows. The choice was no longer just in his mind. It was alive, breathing, fragile, and waiting to be carried through the night. That night, Ethan knew the man who once only brought food was gone. Now, he was the man who would risk everything for a mother, for a daughter, for a fragile hope that might yet survive. The proposal. The night was cold. Clouds hid the stars, and the ruined city lay in silence. Ethan moved quickly through the broken streets, his coat pulled tight, his eyes scanning every shadow. Behind him, Sarah walked with Lyra in her arms. The girl's faint glow was hidden beneath the blanket Ethan had given her. Every sound made Ethan tense. The bark of a stray dog, the creak of rusted metal, the distant murmur of soldiers all felt like alarms. If they were caught, there would be no mercy. At last, they reached his small house. Ethan unlocked the door quietly, pulled them inside, and shut it fast. His heart pounded. For the first time, the aliens were in his home. The back room had been prepared. Blankets covered the floor, and a small candle flickered in the corner. Ethan guided them there, his hands shaking though he tried to stay calm. Sarah lowered Lyra gently onto the blankets. The girl stirred, her glowing eyes opening weakly. She whispered, "Ethan." Her voice broke him. He knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You're safe." Sarah stood behind them, her tall figure tense, her eyes moving over the room. She touched the walls as if testing their strength, checking every corner like a soldier searching for traps. "This, home?" she asked at last. Ethan nodded. "It's not much, but it's all I have." Sarah's face was unreadable. Her dark eyes flicked from the candle to the cracked ceiling to Ethan himself. She said nothing, but her silence felt heavy, full of questions. Days passed. Lyra's fever eased slowly, with the food and warmth Ethan provided. She grew stronger, smiling more each day. She spoke new words, too. Words Ethan had never expected to hear. "Family," she whispered one morning, pointing at Ethan, then at her mother. Ethan froze. His throat tightened. He forced a smile, but the word echoed in his chest like a bell. Sarah heard it too. Her gaze hardened, but she said nothing. Outside, the city grew more dangerous. Patrols searched houses daily now. Rewards for information had doubled. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. And Ethan knew, if anyone guessed, if anyone saw a glimpse of silver skin through a crack in his shutters, everything would end. He lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to their quiet breathing in the back room. Each night, the thought returned stronger than before. This can't last, they could not hide forever. Sooner or later, someone would knock on his door, and then it would all be over. Unless he made them part of his life fully. Not just hidden guests. Not just a secret he kept in shadows. But family. One evening, Ethan sat at the table, staring at the flickering candle. Sarah sat across from him, her posture straight, her eyes cold but no longer hostile. Lyra slept in the next room, wrapped in the blanket, breathing peacefully. The silence stretched. Finally, Ethan spoke. His voice was low, steady, but trembling inside. "This isn't enough," he said. Sarah tilted her head. "Enough?" "Hiding like this," Ethan explained. "Living in fear every day. Waiting for soldiers to knock. It's not a life." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What choice?" "We hide or we die," Ethan leaned forward. "Or you live with me. Truly live here. Not just as strangers I hide in the dark, but as my family." The words hung in the air, heavier than stone. Sarah stared at him, frozen. Her silver-lined skin caught the candlelight, her eyes deep pools of shock and doubt. "You mean?" she whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. "I mean, come live with me. Be part of my home, my life. No more shadows. No more hiding in ruins." For a long time, Sarah said nothing. Her jaw clenched, her eyes sharp with fear and suspicion. She rose from her chair and began to pace the room. "You risk all," she hissed. "They kill us. They kill you." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "But if we keep hiding, they'll find you anyway. At least this way we choose. We fight to live, not just to survive." Sarah stopped, turning to him. "Why?" Her voice cracked, full of anger and grief. "Why you care?" "We not your kind." Ethan's chest ached. He looked down at the table, then back at her. "Because I lost my family once, and I can't lose another." The room fell silent. The candle flickered, shadows dancing on the cracked walls. Sarah's lips trembled, her fierce mask breaking for a moment. She looked toward the back room where Lyra slept, then back at Ethan. "You promise safe?" she whispered again, like she had before. Ethan nodded firmly. "With my life." At that moment, Lyra stirred and walked into the room, rubbing her eyes. She saw Ethan and Sarah standing apart, tension thick between them. Without a word, she went to Ethan, holding his hand tightly. "Together," she whispered. The single word cut through the silence like light through darkness. Ethan's heart swelled. Sarah's eyes filled with something she tried to hide. Fear. Yes, but also longing. Slowly, painfully. She gave a small nod. Ethan exhaled, the weight lifting but replaced with a heavier one. Responsibility. He had asked, and they had said yes. Now the danger was greater than ever. But for the first time since the war began, Ethan felt something burning in his chest. Not just fear. Hope. The new beginning. The first night in Ethan's house passed without trouble. But he didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of Sarah and Lyra breathing in the back room. The weight of his choice pressed on him. He had opened his home, his life to them. If the soldiers discovered them now, it wouldn't only be Sarah and Lyra who paid the price. It would be him too. And yet, when he rose at dawn and saw Lyra sitting on the floor holding the book he had given her, whispering words softly to herself, tree, bird, house, his fear felt smaller. For the first time in years, his home wasn't empty. Over the next days, the rhythm of life shifted. Lyra laughed more. She followed Ethan around the house, curious about everything. She touched the wooden table, the cracked window, the books on his shelf. Every object seemed like a wonder to her. "This home," she whispered one morning, her silver eyes shining. Ethan smiled. Yes, home. Sarah was different. She moved carefully, always alert, her dark eyes scanning every sound outside. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her words carried weight. At night, Ethan sometimes found her standing by the window, staring out at the ruined city with a face full of grief and fire. Still, even she began to change. One evening, Ethan found her cooking with him in the small kitchen, her movements awkward but steady. When Lyra tasted the food, she clapped her hands, laughing. For a brief moment, Sarah's lips curved into the smallest smile. It was fragile, but it was real. Outside, danger grew sharper. Soldiers tightened their patrols, knocking on doors without warning. Neighbors whispered about who might be hiding aliens. One afternoon, Ethan overheard two women in the market. They say someone close is helping them. One muttered. Foolish. The other replied. The army will find out soon. Ethan kept his head down, buying only what he needed. Every glance felt heavy. Every step home felt like walking through fire. But when he returned, when he saw Lyra running to greet him, her glowing hand reaching for his, the fear was worth it. Days turned into a week. The house felt alive again. At night, Ethan told small stories from old books. Lyra listened with wide eyes, repeating the words she could understand. Sarah sat quietly, but her gaze softened as she listened too. For Ethan, it felt like the beginning of something new, a second chance. One night, as the candle burned low, Lyra sat between them, her small voice whispering a single word, family. The word hung in the air. Ethan looked at Sarah. She looked back, her eyes wet with something she wouldn't let fall. She said nothing, but she didn't need to. The silence was answer enough, but beginnings are fragile. Late one evening, just as Ethan was locking the door, he heard a sound. A knock. 3 sharp raps against the wood, his blood froze.